Well, let's get into your origin story a little bit. How did you just get into this business that you're in right now?
I was actually a woman in tech for almost 21 years, and I was running a company that was down in Norman, Oklahoma, and was running a technology company. They built websites, but in particular built a lot of really customized software, membership databases, and things along those lines. And I had been the CEO for over a decade and was loving the industry and loving what I was doing, but I had really actually fallen in love with the fact that I had read this Scaling Up book, that I had started all these worksheets and implementing all of these tools in the business. So I grew Levant 600% of its size while I was a CEO. And I started to figure out that maybe that's where my true personal niche lies, and that I wanted an opportunity to maybe break away, become a coach, and be able to help more businesses than just be an employee of one company in particular. So for the last year and a half, I have been a business coach, and I've now been really blessed with the opportunity to serve over 130 executives just in 2020 alone.
Wow, that you are certainly keeping busy. I'm impressed. 600% is a huge growth. What are some like basic advice on how to accomplish that?
So one of the things that was really helpful was mastering and understanding what Verne Harnish, he's actually sold over 500,000 books, and it's already been translated into 17 different languages across the globe. So there's a lot of companies who are doing this, and they follow what they call the 4 decisions that every business owner needs to get right. So they talk a lot about people, making sure that you have the right people on the bus, in the right seats, doing the right things right. And then, of course, we talk about strategy. And so it's really an organization that's well known for their 7 strata of strategy. Then there is the execution. So it's people, it's strategy, execution. When you get to execution, he really relies very heavily on the John D. Rockefeller habits. So there's a set of 10 habits that you might have these really great people on your team, and you might have glorious ideas and wonderful strategy. But if you don't implement the ideas you have with the people that you have, then you'll just be talking about what your dreams are rather than actually living them out. So those execution habits that are those John D. Rockefeller habits are really important. And then that 4th decision is cash. And that's something that a lot of small business owners learn more and more about as they grow their company, because growth really sucks cash. So understanding the cash flow and balance sheet and profit and loss, those are all things that I really enjoy helping companies with.
You're talking about execution habits. What are some good execution habits for both business and everyday life that you've learned?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I love to do is to write down, whether it be a goals or whether it be to-do list. Everybody has a different personality style, but if you can write it down and actually have it in front of your face every day, then there is so much more accountability. I think I heard a statistic the other day. It was something higher than like 65% of people will do better at achieving goals if they share those goals out loud with someone else. So I think a lot of people write down their goals, but I'm not sure if they take the second step of actually sharing those goals with someone else, whether that be in a peer group or whether that be a coach, somebody who can hold them accountable and kind of ask, whether it be on a daily or weekly basis, how are those goals going? Did you have a good day yesterday or a bad day yesterday? So in your personal life, I'm a big fan of writing things down, having the ability to scratch them off and say, I did that, I accomplished that, I achieved that. I think that that's a real joy for a lot of people.
But I heard something that was kind of the opposite about be careful sharing some of your goals, because sometimes it kind of gives that brain feeling, kind of tricks you into, well, you feel like you accomplished something just by talking about it.
Oh, how interesting.
The counterpoint to that is like, if you do get that trick where it feels like, you're talking about like, oh, I feel like, oh, I talked about my goals and I accomplished them just by talking about them, but you didn't really do anything. So how could you I guess, counterbalance that?
Well, I do think that you're right that when you decide who you want to share your goals with, that it's important that you pick the right type of individual, whether it's a person or whether it's an entire advisory council that you put together. You want to be sure that you're sharing your goals with individuals who are positive, who are uplifting, who believe in you, and who have, whether it be third-party knowledge or outside knowledge. I like to make sure that the person that's holding you accountable is really not even somebody in your industry industry, because they can offer such a different perspective. And I think that that's a really unique thing to have. So you do want to be sure you're sharing your goals and you're not choosing a negative Nancy or a Debbie Downer that you're choosing them to share them with, and then they kind of pull you down rather than lift you up whenever you need it. But I've actually never heard of anybody saying that, writing down those goals and speaking those goals out loud somehow makes them feel like they're done with them. That would be news to me.
I think it's also important to learn from some mistakes too.
Yes.
So what are some mistakes that you have seen when people try to scale up and that could be avoided? And that lessons that we can learn from failures, if you will.
Absolutely. So each of those 4 decisions, the people, the strategy, the execution, and the cash, there's always going to be massive success stories. And then there's always going to be those cautionary tales too of, I went and I did this, and this is something that a lesson learned that came out of it. So one of the things that I think is important is people really understanding their cash, whether it be via a CPA, a CFO, or any kind of third-party, business coach that they might have, but understanding cash flow, literally the flow of money in and money out every day of every week. I want to be sure that companies are looking at their cash flow, because when they're growing, growth sucks cash. It's like fuel for your growth, and it happens so quick. You get a new building, you get a new fleet of trucks, you hire 5 or 6 more people. All of a sudden you landed one really big deal, and it sounds like a ton of revenue is coming in, but in reality, the revenue is coming in and then it's going right out the back door because you had to hire so many people in order to fulfill this really large contract that you've never done before. So it's always a good idea to have real professional cash advice on your side and make sure that all your ducks are in a row so that your cash in and your cash out has some kind of steady flow to it, and that you're aware of how those things work.
Tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about for Oklahoma Venture Forum.
So I'm excited to bring to the Oklahoma Venture Forum, hopefully an idea that is fresh and new and that people haven't necessarily been thinking about during 2020 and all of the pivot in the pandemic exercises that we've been going through as business owners and as CEOs and business coaches. The one thing that I ran across that worked really well with my clientele is something that United States Air Force Colonel John Boyd actually came up with. And he came up with this decades ago. He never made millions off of it. He didn't write a book. I don't even think there's any documentation that he wrote down what his OODA Loop is, but he verbally is a person who trained over and over and over in person almost all of the United States Air Force fighter pilots for many decades on this OODA Loop concept. So John Boyd is considered the fighter pilot who changed the art of war. And for at least the last 4 to 5 decades, business owners have been using this OODA Loop concept and this concept that's from the military in business. So what I'm going to be teaching about and telling everybody is a little bit about what OODA Loop stands for. So the OODA is actually standing for observe, orient, decide, and act. And I'm going to break down each of those areas so that they understand how can this be used as a faster decision-making tool in the future, whenever they have a fight or flight response, whenever they ever have a year that's like 2020 again, or all of the things that have been happening with COVID-19, they have a tool that they can go back to and say, I know how to calm down, I know how to look at the facts, I know how to orient myself to those facts, make a decision, act, and start my loop again, so that I have a fast, quick decision-making tool that gives me confidence in my business to proceed.
So what about this tool that, I guess I want to ask the why, like, why does this tool help?
One of the things that I really love about the tool is that the first step is making sure that when you observe, that you're observing facts only. So when you're in a crisis mode, a lot of times our emotions are at play, or there is competing information and we're not really sure which way to go. And that's when our anxiety kind of grips us and we don't take a step forward. So the very first part of that OODA loop that I think works so well is observing the facts without bringing any bias in whatsoever. So we don't want our emotions, we don't want our opinions or what we think is going to happen, but we just want to observe the facts that are around us. What do we know and what do we not know? And that initial pinpoint of the exercise is one of the things that I think is the most fruitful.
Tell us about what's the next phase.
Yeah, so once you have observed the brutal facts that are around you, you've listed what you know and you've listed what you don't know. The very next step is to make sure that you orient yourself. So you want to orient, where am I in this environment? Where does my company fit among this list of facts or the trends that are happening to occur right now? So when you're making sure that you're orienting to that, that's when you want to look at that list of what you don't know. How could you find out? Who could you ask? What could you research? How quickly could you get to what we call like the 80-20 rule and make sure that you feel confident in any of those facts that you don't know so that you can make quick decisions and go from observation of facts to orientation of where am I in these facts? How do these facts fit in with my industry, with my company? And what do I need to learn really quickly so that you can go to the very next one and start making decisions?
For a quick reference, the 80-20 rule?
So the 80-20 rule is great. It's just a law of diminishing returns, and it's perfect for people like me and many other CEOs who are out there who might consider ourselves perfectionists. Mm-hmm. Perfectionists are also termed procrastinators. Mm-hmm. And I don't mind saying it because I am one, that we often can become paralyzed with the anxiety or the fear that we're not perfect or that we don't have all the facts and that we have to wait until we know A to Z to take our very first step. And that's really not true. In order to keep our companies really viable, especially in a year like 2020, when things that used to happen in months or years or decades are now happening in days and weeks, and it's really, really quick, we have to pull back from that perfectionism. We have to realize that 100% perfection cannot be the goal. 80% is plenty for us to go ahead and observe, orient, decide, and start to make those actions. So that's how I like to apply the 80-20 rule to this particular OODA loop, is just to say you can't sit in one phase for too long and you can't expect perfection because the world around you is moving too fast. Your competition is moving too fast. Your industry, technology, everything around you is interconnected now. So 80% is good enough and we need to move forward.
Always reminds me of the quote, perfection is the enemy of good.
Exactly, yes.
So on the decision part, I guess, how do you make good decisions?
So when you're making those decisions, some of the things that you want to be sure that you're doing is asking your customers. The more and more layers of management that get between a CEO or a CFO and their C-suite executives, if they have a second layer of middle management, a third layer of middle management, all the way down to their employees and then their customers, they're getting pretty far removed. Mm-hmm. And so they might be making decisions in a vacuum. So when they're in that boardroom, one of the things that I like to talk to them about as a coach is that when they're making those decisions you need to actually start at that observation phase and make sure that you're observing those that are on the grassroots level. What are your customers saying? How are they responding? How are they reacting? What do your customers need and want? What are they talking about as fears and as motivations during this time? Same with employees. You want to go to the root source and you really want to have as much connectivity as a CEO can have with customers and with employees is really important for them to make the best decisions so that they're not making decisions in a vacuum of a boardroom somewhere. And maybe it's been 2 or 3 years since they even had an employee survey. Maybe it's been 5 or 6 years since the last time that they spoke to more than 10 customers. That's really important during a pandemic or during any kind of major moment in time with your industry, that you go back to those grassroots and that the CEO feels like they have a handle on what the customers and what the employees are thinking.
Well, let's talk about the final step. Tell us a little bit about that and how that works.
Absolutely. So what's great about finishing your loop is that you're going to observe and make sure that you have all the raw data, all the facts, and you don't bring in any of your bias or any of your emotion. And you're going to move from observation of what do I know and what do I not know. You're going to move into orientation. And when you move into orientation, you need to decide, how do I fit among all these facts? And how do I orient myself to my industry and learn some of this stuff so that I can hit my 80-20 rule and feel confident in making those decisions? And you might be making those decisions based on what customers are telling you, based on what employees are telling you. The minute you decide, I want you to literally visualize that that moment should be like a basketball court. So when you're watching basketball, you're watching the Oklahoma City Thunder or anybody else that is your favorite team, and that ball leaves the tip of their fingers, they should be watching that ball because they have to then say, I made a decision and I acted. I shot this ball. Now, is it going to go in or is it going to bounce off the rim? Because that's when you close the loop. That basketball player needs to know when they decided and when they acted and took that shot, are they on offense or are they on defense? They have to know what to do next. And so that's how you close the loop, is that as soon as you make the decision, you do the action, and you immediately go back into observation mode, just like a basketball player would. Am I on defense? Am I on offense? In your business, you need to think the same way. As soon as you decide and you make an action, you need to start to go back into that observation mode. Look at the data, look at the facts. Was it the right decision? How is it going? And keep a close eye on it. Don't let it just linger for the next 90 days and then look at it in a lagging way, at the end of your quarter and say, did this work? Was this effective? In times like these, in the year 2020, we need to be looking at, is it effective every day, every week, every month? We can't be waiting until a quarterly session to look at that.
Oh, we'll start kind of winding it down. Appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. Is there anything about yourself first that you'd like to talk about and share that I didn't ask you about, or you'd like to just put it on out there?
No, I think that you've done a great job. As a business coach, I get so much joy out of helping others grow. It's really been a passion of mine. And to be able in 2020 to help over 130 executives really shows me that I chose an amazing path and that I'm enjoying this journey. And I just love walking with the CEOs on the journey with them, because when you decide to scale your company, when you decide to really grow, maybe even 10x your EBITDA and what your company's value is really worth, it's a journey, it's a path. It's going to take more than 30 days. It's going to take more than 90 days. So typically when I'm business coaching and working with somebody, we're working on an annual basis for a strategic plan. We're working every single quarter on all those executables. I actually call it a 13-week race, because 13 weeks is typically how long you have from the beginning of a quarter to the end. And it's really quick. You can't let a single week of that 13 weeks go by, or else you won't achieve all the goals that you want. And every quarter rolls into that big year of strategy. And it takes maybe 3 to 5 years for people to master those Rockefeller habits and master everything that is within that scaling up platform of people, strategy, execution, and cash. So it's a journey that I'm on with them, and I really enjoy it.
Well, on the subject of habits, what are some other good habits you think leaders should have?
Well, one of the habits that I really like to promote is called the daily huddle. So the daily huddle is a really effective communication rhythm for making sure that everybody is in sync on the team. And a daily huddle is exactly what it sounds like. Think football. Think when the players get together, they get a little huddle and break. It's supposed to be quick, fast, short, and to the point. So a daily huddle is something that you stand up. You have no chairs, no seats, you're not sitting down, and there's no way that you could run over and have an hour-long meeting because everybody is standing. So it's meant to try to be 12 minutes or less. So it's every single day, whether it's in the morning or the afternoon, whatever works for your industry, whatever works for your company, a 12-minute huddle where everybody gets together and they have a very specific agenda that they go through. What's up? What's the news of their day? Is there any weather to report, any kind of stucks, any kind of issues with them hitting their KPIs and hitting their metrics? And they go through this agenda and this rhythm really quickly in a 12-minute segment with everyone standing, and then everyone is in sync with what exactly they're doing that day. Each teammate actually says, I commit to achieving blank results by the end of today. And then the very next huddle the next day, they say, I did achieve it, or I only got 80% done. They actually have accountability every day to what they committed to.
For those interested in attending your Zoom event for Oklahoma Venture Forum, what sort of words of encouragement or motivation would you like to give to them?
I'm really excited about having the opportunity to speak to the Oklahoma Venture Forum. As an Oklahoma City business coach and somebody who travels among North America helping CEOs, I've had a great relationship with OVF and had an opportunity to attend a couple of events. I even have clients that have won some of your nominations that you have on an annual basis. So it's really an exciting community, and I am proud to be able to help them. Many of them might have even heard of the OODA Loop before, but maybe they have not put it into perspective of how to use the OODA Loop within the year 2020 and within the type of anxiety that CEOs are having these days, the types of pivots that they're making during this pandemic. So I'm excited to take an old concept that's been around for decades and maybe breathe it some new life into what the year 2020 has to offer.